"Get your filthy hands off my daughter." The voice was sharp, cold, and full of contempt. Every spoon clink and coffee sip in the tiny diner froze. Conversations halted. Heads turned. Daniel Reed, tall, immaculately dressed in a navy wool coat and polished shoes, stood at the edge of booth 3, his face pale with fury, lips curled with disgust. Across from him, a black waitress knelt on the linoleum floor, gently holding a 5-year-old girl who was sobbing into her chest. The little girl clutched the woman's apron with trembling fingers. "I said don't touch her." The woman slowly looked up. Her eyes were wide but steady, her voice shaking but soft. "I'm sorry, sir." She was crying, asking for her mom. "I just held her. That's all." Daniel's jaw clenched. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "You think because you wear that rag and hand out coffee you can just insert yourself into my life? You think my daughter needs someone like you?" He stepped closer. "Stay in your lane. This isn't your world." The waitress instinctively backed away on her knees, the weight of his words sinking into her skin like cold water. "Still," she whispered. She looked so lost. I couldn't just stand there." His hands tightened at his sides. "Don't pretend this was for her. You're looking for attention or pity. Either way, you don't belong near my daughter. Not you, not your kind." And then, in a moment driven more by instinct than reason, he shoved her. It wasn't hard, but it was enough. The waitress, no more than 29, slender. Before we continue, if you find this story interesting, make sure to subscribe. It really encourages us to keep bringing you more. Exhausted, fell back, landing hard against the leg of a table. The edge struck her side, and she gasped as her elbow scraped the floor. Blood appeared in a thin line across her arm. A hush spread like wildfire across the diner. Ava, the little girl, looked up. "Daddy," she whispered, eyes wide in terror. Daniel didn't move. The waitress sat up slowly, blinking back tears of pain, one arm wrapped around her ribs. "I didn't mean to upset anyone." "Please," she said, voice thin. "My name is Maya. Maya William. I wasn't trying to intrude." He turned away from her, jaw set. "You already did." Just then, the manager of the diner, a short, red-haired woman in her 60 named Mrs. Miriam, rushed over. "What's going on here?" she demanded, looking from Maya to Daniel to the still crying child. "She laid her hands on my daughter," Daniel snapped. Mrs. Miriam turned to Maya, eyes flashing. "You touched a guest's kid?" Maya's voice cracked. She was crying. "I didn't want her to feel alone." "You're not here to feel anything," the manager barked. "You're here to serve. You want to hug kids? Go work at a daycare. You're lucky he doesn't press charges." Maya's lip trembled. Her breath shook. She looked between the furious manager and the cold, well-dressed man holding his daughter's hand like a trophy. And then, she broke. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't fire me. My mother's sick. She needs medicine every week. I can't afford to lose this job." The manager folded her arms. "This ain't a charity." Maya lowered her head. "I know, I'm sorry." Daniel looked at her again, not with anger now, but with something else. The pleading in her voice didn't sit right. The way she'd held Ava, that hadn't been calculated. It had been instinctive, familiar, human. He looked down at Ava, who was now clutching his leg, her face pressed into his trousers. "She made me feel warm," the little girl whispered, barely audible. Daniel didn't respond. He turned back to Maya one last time. She stood now, arm still bleeding, wiping it quietly with a napkin from her apron. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Without another word, he scooped Ava into his arms and turned toward the door. Outside, the cold bit through his coat. Ava shivered in his embrace. He didn't know why his chest felt tight. He didn't know why the image of Maya kneeling, arms wrapped around a child who wasn't hers, apologizing while bleeding, wouldn't leave his mind. He only knew that for the first time in months, his daughter had cried into someone's arms, and it wasn't out of fear. It was relief. The silence inside the black Cadillac Escalade was heavy as stone. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles pale beneath the leather of his gloves. He didn't look at Ava, who sat strapped into her booster seat in the back, her head turned toward the window. staring at nothing. The wipers swept across the windshield rhythmically, clearing away the light drizzle. They sounded louder than usual. Or maybe that was just because Daniel couldn't stop hearing the words he'd spat only moments earlier. "You don't belong near my daughter. Not you. Not your kind." They echoed in his mind like a sour aftertaste. He stole a glance in the rearview mirror. Ava hadn't said a word since they left the diner. Not about the food. Not about the waitress. Not even about the shouting. Just silence. She hadn't even cried. That wasn't like her. Back at the estate, the gates swung open automatically. The property was lined with manicured hedges, trimmed like military haircuts. The house itself, a modern steel and glass marvel, glowed like a cold museum under the gray sky. Daniel pulled into the roundabout driveway and parked. He opened the back door, and Ava unbuckled herself with slow, quiet hands. "Come on," he said gently. She stepped out without a word, holding her stuffed rabbit to her chest like a shield. Inside, the warmth and marble floors welcomed them, but nothing felt comforting. Daniel placed his keys in the tray by the door and handed his coat to Elena, the housekeeper, who gave Ava a smile that wasn't returned. "Everything all right, mister?" "Reed?" Elena asked. "Yes," he replied quickly. "Just a long morning." Ava headed upstairs without asking. She didn't even turn back. Daniel poured himself a glass of water in the kitchen, his jaw tense. He couldn't shake the image of the waitress Maya on the floor. Blood on her arm, voice trembling. And yet, even then, she hadn't cursed him. She hadn't lashed out. She'd apologized, pleaded. Not for herself, but for her job. For her mother. He hated that the moment had stayed with him. He told himself he had every right to be furious. She had crossed a line. No one, no stranger had the right to put their hands on his child, no matter the circumstances. But when he remembered the way Ava clung to Maya, the soft murmur of the child's voice, "She made me feel warm," something inside him cracked. Daniel went up to Ava's room. He paused at the door and watched her from the hallway. She sat on the floor, braiding her bunny's ears. Her little face was unreadable, but it wasn't the flatness that struck him, it was the tiredness. 5 years old, and already carrying weight she shouldn't. He knocked gently. "Hey, kiddo." She didn't answer, but she didn't tell him to go away either. He stepped inside. "You hungry?" A shake of the head. "Wanna talk?" Another shake. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. "About what happened at the diner." Ava didn't look up. "I didn't like someone touching you without permission. That's why I got mad." She finally lifted her gaze. "You yelled at her." "Yes," he admitted. "You pushed her." He hesitated. "I did." "She got hurt," Ava whispered. "You made her bleed." Daniel rubbed his face. "I know. I shouldn't have. She was just nice to me." The words hit harder than they should have. He swallowed. "I miss Mommy," Ava said next, like she was reminding him, or maybe herself. Daniel stared at the floor. "Me too." Silence stretched between them. "She smelled like vanilla," Ava added. Daniel blinked. "Who?" "Maya." That name, hearing it from his daughter's mouth, felt strange. Personal. Soft. "I felt safe," Ava said, then picked at a frayed thread on her bunny's paw, like Mommy was close. Daniel's heart pulled tight in his chest. He didn't know what to say to that. That night, he poured himself a scotch and sat in his study. He stared at the fireplace but didn't light it. He didn't need heat. He needed clarity. He opened his laptop intending to work, but instead, typed into a search bar, "Maya William Boston Diner." Nothing. He refined it. "Maya William Waitress Miriam's Diner." Still nothing concrete. No LinkedIn, no profiles, no photos. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Dirt? A reason to feel justified in his outburst? Or maybe something to prove she really was harmless. Instead, he closed the laptop and leaned back, sipping the drink, tasting ash. He saw her again in his mind, kneeling, calm under pressure, arms around Ava, a stranger who offered comfort without asking anything in return. Not many people had ever touched Ava without the little girl recoiling. She let the nurses hold her. Sometimes the nanny. Rarely Daniel himself. But this woman, a stranger, had been held like family. If that moment touched your heart too, don't forget to like this video to show your support for stories that matter. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? You never know, someone nearby might be watching with you right now. The next morning, Ava came down dressed and ready without being asked. She didn't speak until they were halfway through breakfast. Will we go to the diner again? Daniel looked up from his black coffee. Why? Ava shrugged, not meeting his eyes. Just wondered. He didn't answer. But all day, the question hung in his mind like smoke. That evening, after another hollow dinner, Daniel walked out onto the terrace, letting the breeze hit his face. He didn't believe in fate. Never had. He believed in logic, numbers, data, results. But something about Maya, her voice, her eyes, her stillness stayed with him. Something that whispered of things he didn't fully understand. Something Ava seemed to sense long before he could. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Reed, a man who had built a fortune through control, precision, and walls, felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The morning sun filtered softly through the glass windows of the office, casting long gold beams across Daniel's sleek mahogany desk. Normally, if you're still here and enjoying the story, we'd love your support. Take a second to hit subscribe. It really means a lot. Mornings at Reed Innovations began with a sharp focus, emails reviewed, investor calls lined up, meetings prepped with military precision. But today, Daniel sat motionless in his chair, staring not at his screen but at his reflection in the black monitor. He hadn't slept well. Not because of Ava's crying. She hadn't cried last night. That's what disturbed him most. She was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that signaled rest, but the kind that told him something inside her had shut down again. She had asked about the diner. No, not the diner, about her. About Maya. Daniel tapped his fingers slowly against the armrest, then turned toward the window. From the 38th floor, Boston looked clean and manageable. The way he preferred things, the way he had built his empire. But down on the street, where people like Maya worked and survived and bled without headlines, the world wasn't so orderly. He hated how much space she had taken up in his mind. She was just a waitress. Just another face in a sea of millions. But still, her voice had stayed. Ava's tears on her shoulder had stayed. And the way Maya didn't defend herself when insulted, shoved, humiliated, that stayed the most. She didn't even scream. Daniel reached for the file on his desk marked Private, Estate Expansion, but the words blurred. What kind of man pushed a woman? What kind of father let his grief turn into fear, and then into anger? He shut the file and stood. Meetings could wait. It wasn't planned. He told himself it was a coincidence that he drove past Miriam's diner again. It wasn't. He parked across the street, far enough that no one would recognize the car, close enough to observe. From behind the tinted window, he scanned the narrow diner, its chrome sign flickering slightly in the morning light. Maya wasn't there. An older waitress served coffee to an elderly couple by the window. A man in his 50s mopped near the back booth. No sign of her. Daniel leaned forward slightly. A strange tension built in his chest, like a pulled string waiting to snap. He wasn't sure what he had hoped for. To see her working as if nothing happened? To watch her limp from the bruises he caused and feel? What? Guilt? Closure? She was simply gone. He exhaled through his nose and leaned back, jaw tight. Maybe it was better that way, less messy. Then his phone buzzed. Greg asked, reminder, Onzam board W divisé par Seattle division. Need your presence. Slide sunt. Daniel ignored it. Instead, he rolled down the window halfway and let the autumn breeze sweep through the car. The sound of street noise filtered in engines, idling, footsteps, occasional laughter. Life moved on, indifferent to his unease. And then, a sound pierced through, a child laughing. His heart stopped for a second, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was Ava's laugh. He looked up. Across the sidewalk, just outside a corner pharmacy 2 blocks away, stood a woman with a paper bag under her arm, helping an elderly lady into a cab. She wore a faded denim jacket, and her hair was tied back in a simple braid. Maya. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Her arm, the same one he'd seen bloodied, was bandaged under the jacket, just barely visible. She moved stiffly, carefully, but her face remained composed. The elderly woman she assisted smiled and patted her cheek before stepping into the cab. Daniel stared, unmoving. Maya stood there for a moment after the cab drove off, adjusting the strap on her bag. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone. Not the sleek kind. An old, cracked screen model. She tapped it once, waited, and then pressed it to her ear. Daniel couldn't hear anything, but her body language said enough. Her head bowed slightly. Her hand trembled. After a few seconds, she lowered the phone and sighed, shoulders sagging. Then she turned to walk in the opposite direction. Something gripped him harder than guilt, stronger than curiosity. He stepped out of the car. She didn't hear him approach at first, not until his voice broke the air. Maya. She stopped mid-step, turning slowly. Her expression shifted from confusion to recognition, and then, just barely, to fear. She stood straighter. Mr. Reed. He nodded once. You're hurt. She looked down at her elbow, then back up. I've had worse. Daniel didn't know what to say. This wasn't a boardroom. There were no metrics to hide behind. I shouldn't have pushed you, he said. A flicker passed across her face. No, she replied simply. I was angry, he added. That doesn't excuse it. No, she said again, her voice steady, but quieter. He glanced away. Why didn't you fight back? Or report me? She hesitated. Would you have listened if I had? He looked at her then. Her eyes weren't challenging, they were tired. Tired in the way people get when they're used to swallowing pain before it swallows them. No, he admitted. Silence stretched between them. Daniel took a deep breath. Ava asked about you. Twice. Maya's lips parted slightly. Is she all right? He nodded. She's quiet. But she remembered how you made her feel. Safe. She said you smelled like vanilla. That surprised a faint smile from Maya, the first since they met. It's the hand cream, she said. Cheap stuff. Smells like cookies. Daniel looked at her. Really looked this time. She was younger than he thought. Barely 30. The kind of woman the world overlooked unless she caused a scene, and she never did. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. But I wanted you to know that I remember. And I regret it. She studied him for a long time. You don't seem like the kind of man who says that often. I'm not. Maya nodded slowly. Then, without smiling, she said, I have to get back. My shift starts at the grocery store in 20 minutes. He stepped aside, letting her pass. As she walked away, Daniel called after her, his voice lower now. If you ever need anything for your mother, let me know. She didn't turn around, but she stopped briefly and said, she doesn't need charity, she needs dignity. No. Then she walked away, fading into the rhythm of the street. Daniel stood there, hands in his coat pockets, heart heavier than when he arrived. She had answered him, not with fear, but with grace. Ava sat curled up on the oversized leather chair in the sunroom, her bunny tucked under one arm, a blanket pooled around her tiny frame like a cocoon. Morning light streamed in, scattering across the polished floor, but Daniel wasn't looking at the sunshine. He was watching his daughter. She had spoken again last night. A full sentence this time. I wish the vanilla lady could read to me. Daniel hadn't known how to respond, so he'd simply said, we'll see. Now, as Ava flipped through a picture book in silence, his mind was on the woman whose name he hadn't stopped thinking about since that awful day. Maya William. She hadn't reported him. She hadn't sued. She hadn't even spoken his name since. But her absence had changed something. It was as if she'd held up a mirror, and Daniel was finally seeing the cracks in himself, not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a father. And they were deep. Greg entered the room with a tablet and a cautious expression. Sir, the board is asking if you're planning to attend today's Q3 wrap meeting. Daniel barely glanced at the screen. Have Rebecca handle it. Just send me the minutes. Greg hesitated. It's the 4th meeting you've skipped this month. I'm aware. Greg gave a slight nod. Understood. Daniel waited until the door clicked shut behind him before walking over to Ava. Hey, Jump. Ava looked up. Want to take a drive? He asked, voice casual. She blinked. Where? Daniel crouched beside her chair, somewhere with pancakes. A faint smile tugged at her lips. 10 minutes later, they were on the road again. The city passed by in smooth, sleepy rhythm brownstones, school buses, the familiar skyline slowly retreating in the rearview mirror. Ava clutched her bunny in one hand, the other resting quietly in her lap. They didn't speak much on the drive, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence Daniel had once feared, and now, somehow, found comforting. When they reached the diner, he parked farther away than usual, out of instinct more than planning. As they stepped out, he took Ava's hand gently. Inside, the place smelled of bacon grease and syrup. Booth 3 was empty. Daniel scanned the room quickly. No sign of Maya. Ava tugged his sleeve. "She's not here." "I see that," he said, hiding his own flicker of disappointment. "We can still eat. You okay with that?" Ava nodded. Mrs. Miriam spotted them from the counter and stiffened. She walked over with a neutral expression. "Mr. Reed," she said, her tone polite but cool. "Back so soon?" Daniel gave a curt nod. "Yes, thought I'd treat my daughter to a better morning." Mrs. Miriam raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Ava climbed into the booth and waited patiently, as Daniel ordered pancakes for her and black coffee for himself. After the waitress left, Ava leaned over the table. "Can we see Maya again?" Daniel paused. "I don't know. She didn't do anything bad," Ava said softly. "I know. Then why did you get mad?" Daniel sighed. "Because I was scared." Ava tilted her head. "Scared of her?" "No," he admitted. "Scared I couldn't make you feel safe." She studied him with quiet curiosity. "She made me feel warm. Like Mommy." Daniel's throat tightened. "She didn't try," Ava added. "She just listened." He looked away, blinking hard. Their food arrived, and Ava ate slowly, savoring each bite. But Daniel couldn't taste his coffee. His thoughts were with the woman who had somehow touched the heart of his daughter in one fragile, honest moment. After breakfast, as they prepared to leave, a voice called out from the kitchen, "Wait." Daniel turned. A young man in a flower-streaked apron came rushing out. "You're the guy that came in with the little girl last week?" Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Depends who's asking." The man grinned. "Maya left something for your daughter. Said if you ever came back, I should give it to you." He reached under the counter and pulled out a small envelope with Ava written in neat, loopy handwriting. Daniel took it carefully and crouched down beside Ava. "It's for you." Ava opened the envelope with delicate fingers. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a charm bracelet with tiny animal pendants, an elephant, a rabbit, a cat. The note read, "To Ava, in case you need a hug and I'm not around. Every charm means someone loves you. Hold tight. Love, Maya." Ava's eyes welled up instantly. She hugged the bracelet to her chest. "Can we go find her now?" Daniel looked up at the young man. "Do you know where she lives?" The boy hesitated. I think she's taking care of her mom. Lives off Jefferson Street, near the old park. Small duplex. Blue door. I can't say for sure she's private, but I know she's been working 2 jobs." Daniel stood slowly, his mind already made up. "Come on, Ava," he said quietly. "Let's go for another drive." They left the diner behind, but Daniel wasn't just driving toward Jefferson Street. He was driving toward something he hadn't faced in years. The humility to ask forgiveness. The tires hummed softly over the uneven pavement as Daniel guided the Escalade down Jefferson Street. It was the kind of neighborhood where tree roots buckled sidewalks and faded porch swings creaked in the wind. Not dangerous, but weathered like the people who lived there had learned to make do, not complain. He drove slowly, scanning house numbers while Ava sat quietly in the back seat, clutching her charm bracelet in one hand and her stuffed bunny in the other. "There," Ava said suddenly, pointing. Daniel followed her gaze. A small duplex with peeling blue paint and a crooked mailbox sat near the corner. The door had a faded wreath on it, probably handmade. A rusted bicycle leaned against the porch railing. On the steps, a pair of sneakers and a pink watering can. It didn't scream anything special, but Ava's face lit up. Daniel pulled over and parked. He hesitated. He had closed million-dollar deals, addressed auditoriums of investors, faced federal regulators, but right now, he felt like a schoolboy showing up unannounced at the wrong classroom. He stepped out and opened Ava's door. "You sure?" he asked gently. She nodded. She smells like cookies. They walked up the porch steps together. Ava held his hand tighter than usual. He knocked. There was a pause, a shuffle inside. Then the door creaked open. Maya stood in the doorway, dressed in a plain gray sweatshirt and jeans. Her hair was tied up, her expression tired but clear. She froze when she saw them. Ava was the first to speak. "I brought your bracelet," she said, holding up her wrist. "Thank you." Maya blinked, clearly surprised. "You got my note?" "Yes," Ava said. "And Daddy said we could come see you." Maya's eyes flicked to Daniel. He cleared his throat. "We were, in the neighborhood." She raised an eyebrow. "Really?" A beat of silence passed. "No," he admitted. "We weren't." A breath of something close to amusement passed through her, barely noticeable. She stepped aside. "You might as well come in, I was making tea." Daniel hesitated for half a second, then nodded and stepped inside. The house was modest, neat, but lived in. A scent of lavender and chamomile filled the air. Family photos lined one wall. In the corner, an oxygen tank stood beside a recliner. Daniel noticed the medical papers on the coffee table and the dull beeping of a portable heart monitor nearby. "She's sleeping," Maya said softly, nodding toward a back room. "My mother," Ava whispered. "Is she very sick?" Maya crouched to her level. "She has heart failure. Some days are better than others." Ava reached out, tiny fingers brushing Maya's arm. "My mommy went to heaven." "I know," Maya said. Her voice didn't falter, but her eyes glistened. "And I bet she was amazing." "She smelled like flowers," Ava said. Maya smiled. "That's a beautiful smell." Daniel watched this exchange, emotion tightening in his chest. There was no script, no effort, just a connection one he'd failed to create himself. They sat around a small table in the kitchen, chipped in places, but warm in atmosphere. Maya poured tea. Ava got cocoa with marshmallows. Daniel took his mug in silence. "I wanted to apologize again," he said, properly and face to face. Maya stirred her tea. "You already did that on the sidewalk." "I mean it now more than ever." Maya glanced at him. "I know you do," he exhaled. "I've been ashamed of how I handled everything. I acted out of fear, anger, pride. But Ava's been different since that day. Lighter, I think. I think you gave her something I didn't know how to give." "I didn't give her anything," Maya said softly. "I just didn't run away from her sadness." Daniel looked down at his mug. Her words sank deeper than he expected. He spoke again, quieter now. "You were bleeding, and you still apologized. I've been through worse. That's not an excuse." "No, it's not," Maya agreed. "But people like me, we don't get second chances. If we cry foul, we're loud. If we speak up, we're angry. I've learned to survive by staying quiet." Daniel flinched inwardly. "I was taught that silence buys safety," she continued, "even when it hurts." He looked at her, really looked. "Maya, would you ever consider working with children again?" She blinked. "Why?" "Because Ava hasn't laughed like that in a long time, and I can't ignore the effect you've had on her." Maya's expression shifted, part caution, part curiosity. "You mean, like a nanny?" Daniel nodded. "Not out of pity, not as a handout, but as someone I trust, with my daughter." She paused. "You trust me?" "I didn't before, but I was wrong." Maya bit her lip, uncertain. "I have shifts. My mother still needs care. I can't just—" "I'll take care of the logistics," Daniel said. "Pay, schedule, benefits, medical for your mom too." She stared at him. "I'm not offering charity," he clarified. "I'm offering a role you're uniquely qualified for. You didn't ask to be pulled into our lives, but you were the only one who saw my daughter. Not just her name or her last name, her pain." "Lee." Maya was quiet. "I'll give you time to think," Daniel said, standing. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a card. "Here's my direct number. No assistants, no gatekeepers." She took it hesitantly. Ava walked over and hugged Maya's waist. "I like your house," she said softly. "Thank you, baby," Maya whispered, resting a hand on her head. Daniel watched for another moment. Then, with a quiet nod, he took Ava's hand. "We'll be in touch," he said, and opened the door. Maya stood at the threshold as they walked down the porch steps. The sunlight cast long shadows behind them. She held the business card like it was heavier than it looked. Inside, her mother stirred in the back room. Outside, Daniel didn't speak until they were back in the car. "Do you want her to come live with us?" he asked. Ava clutched her bunny. "No," she said. "I want her to come help us." Daniel looked ahead, the wheels already turning, and for the first time in a long time he felt like maybe, just maybe, they were heading in the right direction. 2 days passed before Maya called. Daniel had waited, though he hadn't realized how much until he heard the phone vibrate beside his desk. He'd been in a meeting with 2 department heads, discussing overseas manufacturing costs, but the moment he saw her name flash across the screen, he stood up. "Excuse me," he said abruptly, leaving the room without another word. He answered as he stepped into the hallway. "Maya?" Her voice came through, soft but steady. "I've thought about your offer." Daniel swallowed. "And I want to say yes," she said. "But I have conditions." That made him pause, then smile. "Go on." "I won't live in," Maya began. "I'll commute. I need to care for my mother every morning and evening." "Done." "I won't work Sundays. That's the only day I get to sit with her at church." "Understood." I want a written contract, not a handshake. I need things to be clear." Daniel nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I'll have one drawn up by Monday." She hesitated, then added, "I won't tolerate being treated like I'm invisible." Daniel's voice dropped. "You have my word, Maya." "That'll never happen again." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "All right, then I'll start on Tuesday." Daniel exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders releasing. "Thank you." "Nah." He could almost hear her half smile. "Don't thank me yet." Tuesday morning arrived like the first day of school. Ava sat on the staircase, brushing her bunny's ears with a soft bristled toothbrush. She was already dressed and had insisted on wearing her pink overalls, the ones with the heart patch on the knee. "Is she coming today?" Ava asked for the 3rd time. "Yes," Daniel said from the kitchen. "She'll be here by 9. "Oh." When the doorbell finally rang, Ava flew to the foyer like a hummingbird. Daniel opened the door just in time to see his daughter throw her arms around Maya's waist. Maya laughed softly. "Hi, sunshine." Daniel stood back, watching the exchange. Maya looked different this time, not just because she wore pressed jeans and a clean jacket, but because her posture had changed. She was standing taller, confident. "Morning, Mr. Reed," she said. "Daniel, please." She gave him a polite nod. Daniel. Elena, the longtime housekeeper, peered cautiously from the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a towel. Daniel turned to her. "Elena, this is Maya William. She'll be joining us as Ava's companion." Elena's brows lifted slightly. "Nice to meet you." Maya smiled warmly. "Likewise." The formalities over, Ava tugged at Maya's hand. "Come see my reading nook." Daniel watched them walk down the hallway, Ava chatting animatedly, Maya listening with full attention. He didn't remember the last time Ava had been that animated before noon. The hours passed quietly. Daniel remained home that morning, working from his study, but occasionally stepping into the hallway to listen. He heard giggles. Reading. Ava's voice rising in excitement, followed by Maya's gentle laughter. Around noon, Maya knocked lightly on his office door. A looked up. "Come in." She stepped inside, holding a drawing in one hand. "Ava made this for you." He reached for it. A crayon sketch of their house, complete with crooked windows, stick figures labeled Daddy and Me, and one more taller, with long brown hair. "Maya," it said underneath, written in uneven block letters. "She wanted you to hang it in your office," Maya said. Daniel smiled faintly. "I'll frame it." Maya hesitated. "She asked me something earlier, about her mother." Daniel straightened. "What did she say?" "She asked if her mom could see her now. If she was proud of her." "Huh." Daniel's face darkened slightly. "What did you tell her?" "I said I thought her mother would be very proud, and I reminded her that memories don't leave just because people do." Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you." Maya glanced around the office. "Your wife. Was she sick?" "No," Daniel said after a beat. "Car accident. 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." "She was on her way to pick Ava up from ballet," he continued quietly. "Ava still doesn't like the sound of screeching tires." "Ugh." Maya stepped closer. "She doesn't need words for that kind of pain. She carries it in her eyes." Daniel didn't reply. but something in him shifted again. Trust, perhaps. Or maybe humility. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Maya prepared to leave. Ava hugged her tightly at the door. "Will you come back tomorrow?" the girl asked. "I will," Maya promised. Daniel opened the door for her. As she stepped onto the porch, he said quietly, "You handled her questions better than I ever could." Maya looked at him. "Sometimes it's easier when it's not your own pain." He watched her walk down the path, her shadow long in the soft light. When he returned inside, Ava had fallen asleep on the couch, her bunny beside her, the charm bracelet wrapped gently around its neck. Daniel stood over her for a long time, then bent and kissed her forehead, something he hadn't done in months. She stirred slightly but didn't wake, and Daniel realized something. He hadn't just hired Maya for Ava, he'd let her in for both of them. The house felt different. Daniel couldn't explain it, not in metrics or spreadsheets, but it was real. He noticed it first in the little things: Ava singing to herself while brushing her teeth, her giggles echoing down the hallways, the way sunlight seemed to rest softer on the hardwood floors. Maya had only been working there for a week, but her presence had begun to carve out a space not just in Ava's world, but in Daniel's as well. And for the first time in 3 years, the mansion didn't feel like a mausoleum. On Friday evening, as the sun began to set over Beacon Hill, Daniel returned home early, briefcase in hand and mind still buzzing from the day's negotiations. He entered through the side door and caught a familiar scent in the air. Vanilla. Cookies? He walked toward the kitchen. There, at the marble island, stood Maya, flower on her cheek, apron tied around her waist, guiding Ava through rolling cookie dough. The little girl stood on a stool, her hands covered in batter, her laughter bouncing off the cabinets. "You're getting it on your nose," Maya teased. "No, I'm not," Ava grinned, dabbing flour onto Maya's sleeve. Daniel paused, watching the scene from the doorway. He hadn't seen Ava like this since before. Before loss had stolen her childhood and grief had filled the silence between them. Ava spotted him first. "Daddy." Maya turned quickly, suddenly aware of the flour on her face. "Sorry, we kind of took over your kitchen." Daniel walked in slowly. "Looks like a hostile sugar invasion." Ava giggled. "We're baking cookies for Mommy's Day." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean Mother's Day?" "No," Ava said. "Mommy's Day. I made it up. For just us." Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at Maya, who gave him a small, understanding smile. "I thought it was a beautiful idea," she said. "A way to remember her." Daniel nodded, clearing his throat. "It is." Ava held up a lumpy cookie in the shape of a heart. "This one's yours, but it's kinda squishy." Daniel took it like a sacred object. "It's perfect." They ate together that evening, cookies and milk at the dining table, something so simple, yet so rare in the Reed household. After Ava went to bed, Maya helped clear the table. Daniel stood beside her at the sink, rinsing the plates while she dried them. "You're settling in," he said, glancing at her. "I try not to get too comfortable," she replied softly. "I've learned comfort can be temporary." Daniel dried his hands. "It doesn't have to be." Maya gave him a cautious look. "You say that now?" "I say that because it's true." She didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. Instead, she reached for a stray cookie from the cooling rack and offered it to him. "Peace offering," she said. Daniel chuckled. "From what? You won that flower war hands down." "No." They both laughed, an unexpected, shared sound that softened the space between them. Then came a knock at the door. Daniel frowned. At this hour, he crossed the foyer and opened the front door. A tall woman in a blazer stood outside, flanked by 2 suited men. She held a leather briefcase and an official-looking badge clipped to her belt. "Mr. Daniel Ride?" "Yes. I'm Susan Thorne, from the Massachusetts Department of Child Welfare." Daniel's stomach dropped. "We received an anonymous report concerning your daughter's emotional well-being," she continued. "We're here to follow up with a wellness visit." Maya appeared behind him, drying her hands on a towel. Her expression shifted instantly: concern, then fear. Ava's voice rang out from upstairs. "Daddy?" Daniel stepped forward protectively. "There's been some mistake." "I'm sure you believe that," Susan replied calmly, "but we'll still need to speak with Ava, and with any adult caregivers in the home." Maya looked at him, eyes wide. Daniel nodded once. Come in." 20 minutes later, Ava sat on the couch, legs swinging, holding her bunny tightly. Susan spoke gently, asking questions about her routines, her feelings, school, and friends. Ava answered with the shy honesty of a 5-year-old. "Yes, I miss Mommy. No, Daddy doesn't yell. Not anymore. Yes, Maya is nice. She smells like cookies. In the kitchen, Daniel sat with one of the agents, going over family records and recent changes in Ava's care. Maya sat at the far end of the counter, clutching the towel still. When Susan finally returned, she looked thoughtful. "There's no indication of neglect or abuse," she said carefully. "Ava seems emotionally sensitive, but stable. The recent addition of a companion appears to be helping." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "So, why the report?" Susan exchanged a look with her colleague. "The file mentioned concerns about a strange woman of unknown background interacting with your daughter. It's possible someone saw Maya and misunderstood her role." Maya stiffened. Daniel's voice dropped to a cold edge. "Or they saw a black woman with my child and assumed the worst." Susan didn't respond directly. "We'll be closing the case with no further action," she said. "But I'd suggest documenting all care arrangements going forward." She handed Daniel a card. "If you receive any more visits or questions, contact me directly." They left. Silence filled the house. Maya finally spoke. "I knew this would happen." Daniel turned to her. "It shouldn't have. But it does," she said quietly. "This is what I mean when I say I can't get comfortable." Daniel walked toward her slowly. "You didn't do anything wrong." "That's not always enough," Maya whispered. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm. "You're not going anywhere. Not unless you choose to." Her eyes searched his face for signs of doubt. There were none. She nodded slowly. "Then we fight it. Together." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Deal." And for the first time, not just in words but in truth, she belonged. It was just after dawn when Maya stepped into the kitchen the next morning. She moved quietly, not wanting to wake anyone, her sneakers making soft taps on the stone floor. The house was still too still, and despite Daniel's words the night before, something in her gut hadn't settled. She moved by habit. Water in the kettle, mug on the counter. She reached into the cupboard for the tea bags Daniel had started keeping stocked, just for her chamomile and peppermint. Simple kindnesses, the kinds that said more than grand gestures. But as she stirred the tea, a different kind of warmth crept up the back of her neck. She was being watched. She turned slowly and froze. Elena stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. Maya straightened. "Good morning." Elena said nothing at first. Then, "You comfortable here?" The words weren't sharp, but they weren't soft either. Maya chose her next ones carefully. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." Elena muttered, stepping into the room. She began wiping down the spotless countertop, unnecessarily. Maya set her mug aside. "Is there something you'd like to say?" The older woman looked up. "I've worked for this family since before Ava was born, before the missus passed, before you." Maya nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" Elena leaned on the counter now, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems you've come in very fast. The girl's attached to you. The man listens to you. And now child services is knocking on the door. That's a lot of drama for 1 week." "No." Maya's chest tightened. "That wasn't my doing." "No, maybe not," Elena said. "But you've stirred the pot. And not everyone in this house drinks tea the way you do." The comment hung in the air, bitter, not bold. Maya straightened. "With all due respect, I'm here because Ava needs consistency. Not because I'm trying to replace anyone." Elena's jaw twitched. "Just remember, consistency can be a threat too. Especially to those of us who've been consistent for years." Then she walked out. Maya stood still, fingers gripping the edge of the counter. "So it begins." Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his study, his fingers drumming against his knee. He'd barely slept. He'd spent half the night replaying the visit from child welfare. Not because they'd found anything wrong, he knew they wouldn't, but because someone had made the call. Someone who wanted Maya gone. He opened his laptop, typed in a few commands, and pulled up the home security system archives. The cameras captured everything from the gate to the foyer to the side entrance where deliveries came in. He fast-forwarded through the footage from the past week. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for until he saw it. 2 days before the visit, around 4:13 p.m. Elena. She stepped outside to take a call. She looked around first twice, then answered, speaking for a full minute and a half. No audio, but her face was tense, serious. He played it again, once more. Then he closed the laptop. Later that morning, Maya took Ava to the library room for story time. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. Books lined the walls. Ava settled into her beanbag chair with her bunny and a bowl of grapes. "I want the giraffe book," she said, pointing. Maya smiled. "Good choice." They were halfway through the story when Daniel knocked on the open door. Maya looked up. Ava waved him in. "Daddy, Maya does all the voices." Daniel smiled at his daughter. "I can tell." He waited until Ava was fully engrossed again, then motioned for Maya to step outside with him. In the hallway, his voice dropped. "We need to talk." Maya tensed. "Did something happen?" Daniel crossed his arms. "I watched the footage." She blinked. "Footage?" "Security cameras," he said. "I saw Elena make a call 2 days before child welfare showed up." Maya's heart sank. "You think it was her?" "I know it was," he said. "Her timing, her tone, it all lines up." "No." Maya looked down. "That explains this morning." "What happened?" "She confronted me. Nothing loud, but not subtle." Daniel frowned. "You don't need to tolerate that." "She's grieving," Maya said softly. "In her way. She's been here a long time. I'm a disruption." "You're not a disruption," Daniel said firmly. "You're what this house needed." Maya shook her head. "It's not just about you and Ava anymore. I'm not looking to cause divides." Daniel's voice softened. "You're not. But the truth always divides, Maya. And the truth is Ava is better because of you." She met his eyes. "What do you want to do?" "I'll talk to Elena. But I want to offer you something else too." She braced herself. "I want you to have full authority over Ava's daily routine. School, meals, reading, outings, everything." Maya blinked. "That's a lot of trust." "I know." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right." Daniel took a step closer. "One more thing." "Yes?" He paused. "Would you have dinner with us tonight?" Maya raised a brow. "Ava and me?" "No, all three of us." She looked at him for a long moment. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to try." Maya finally smiled. "Then I'll be there." That evening, the dining room table was set with white candles, cloth napkins, and a glass vase of tulips from the garden. The room smelled of roasted chicken and thyme. Maya arrived wearing a navy blue blouse, her hair down, her smile gentle. Daniel, in his crisp dress shirt, pulled out a chair for her. Ava beamed across the table. "I picked the flowers," she announced. Maya touched the vase. "They're beautiful." Dinner was simple, but full of laughter. Ava recited the giraffe story by memory. Daniel told a story from his college days that made Ava squeal with laughter. Maya shared how she used to sneak books from the library as a girl because her mother couldn't afford to buy them. By dessert, the mood was light, almost normal. Then Elena entered with the fruit tarts. She paused when she saw Maya at the table. Daniel caught the tension instantly. "Elena, thank you. You're free for the evening." Elena's expression flickered. "Of course, sir." She left without a word. Maya glanced at Daniel. He shook his head once. "Not tonight." Tonight, they'd built something rare. Trust. At the table, between forkfuls of tart and the soft hum of laughter, something unspoken had shifted again. And though the world outside still whispered, for this one evening, they belonged. It was nearly midnight when the phone rang. Daniel was in his study, reviewing a contract for a property expansion deal in Seattle, but he was barely focused. The image of Maya's laughter during dinner still lingered in his mind unforced, warm, like music he didn't realize he missed. Ava had fallen asleep in Maya's lap before dessert ended, and Maya had carried her up the stairs without hesitation, as if she'd belonged to her since birth. He'd watched it all unfold from his seat, the realization dawning slowly. This wasn't just working, it was healing. The phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. A gut instinct made him answer. "Hello? Is this Mr. Daniel Reed?" the voice asked. Male, hurried, professional. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Dr. Harrison Grant." I'm calling from Brigham and Women's Hospital. I have Maya Williams' mother here, Mrs. Lila William. She collapsed earlier this evening. Maya listed you as an emergency contact. Daniel stood up so quickly his chair nearly toppled. What happened? Severe arrhythmia. She went into cardiac arrest. Paramedics revived her en route. She's stable for now. But it's serious. Maya's on her way here by taxi. She didn't want Ava woken, which is why she listed you to help coordinate if needed. I'll be there in 15, Daniel said, already grabbing his coat. The air outside was crisp and biting as Daniel drove through the sleeping city. His fingers gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, adrenaline buzzing beneath his skin. He hadn't even changed out of his dress shirt. It wasn't until he pulled into the hospital lot that he realized something. Maya had trusted him, not just with Ava, but with her world. He jogged through the entrance, past the buzzing fluorescent lights and antiseptic air, toward the emergency department. Maya William? He asked the nurse at the desk. The nurse pointed down the corridor. Daniel turned the corner and saw her. Maya sat alone on a stiff plastic bench, elbows on her knees, hands covering her face. Her jacket had fallen off one shoulder. Her shoes were untied, and her eyes, when she finally looked up, were red and full of fear. He sat beside her without a word. She's in the ICU, Maya said, her voice brittle. They've stabilized her, but it's not good. Daniel placed a hand on her back. She didn't flinch. I should have been home earlier, she whispered. She didn't say anything. Just went to bed early. I thought she was tired, but then I heard the thud. It's not your fault, Daniel said firmly. Maya shook her head. I always think I have more time. With everything. With her. With life. Daniel didn't know how to respond. So he didn't. He just sat there, beside her, present. After a long silence, she asked, Did I do the wrong thing putting you as emergency contact? He turned toward her. No. You did the right thing. She wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. You should be home. With Ava. She's safe. Elena's there. I left a note in case she wakes. Maya gave a bitter laugh. Elena probably loved that. Daniel smiled faintly. She'll manage. Just then, a nurse appeared. Miss William? You can come back now. She's awake. Maya stood slowly. Daniel stood too. The nurse glanced at him. Are you family? No, Daniel said, then paused. But I'm staying. Maya looked at him, surprised. Then, slowly, she nodded. Come with me. The ICU was a world unto itself, dim lights, hushed tones, machines beeping in slow, steady rhythm. Lila William lay on the bed, pale and fragile, her silver hair matted slightly on one side. Tubes ran from her arms. A heart monitor blinked quietly. Maya stepped closer. Hi, Mama, she whispered. Lila stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Maya, she breathed. I'm here, Maya said, leaning close. You scared me. You're always scared, Lila murmured, managing a weak smile. Even when you were little. Maya chuckled through her tears. Still am. Lila's gaze shifted to Daniel. And you are? Daniel stepped forward. A friend. Lila squinted, then nodded faintly. Well, you're tall for a friend. That made both Maya and Daniel laugh genuine, surprised, grateful laughter. Lila looked at her daughter again. I'm not ready, you know. I know, Maya said. But if I have to go, I'm proud of you. Maya swallowed hard. You're not going anywhere. 0. Lila's eyes drifted closed, the medications lulling her back to rest. Maya turned toward Daniel, her face unreadable. He offered, I'll wait out here. But she caught his wrist gently. No, stay. Head did. They sat outside the ICU until dawn, sharing stories. Maya told him about her childhood in New Orleans, how her mom used to dance barefoot in the kitchen, how they scraped through bills with borrowed grace. Daniel, in turn, spoke of boarding school loneliness, of corporate fathers and cold dinner tables, of a wife he'd loved and lost too soon. It wasn't romantic. It was something deeper. Human. At 6:30 Maya's phone buzzed. Ava, Daniel answered gently. Hey, champ.